Hot dog. We're live.
Without Riley.
It's 94 degrees here right now, Matthew.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Heat wave in Colorado.
that's no good.
No. I didn't sign up for that when I moved here.
Is it humid too? Or just
No, it's a humid. You're cute. No, this is Colorado. We don't do that, man. That's your problem.
Yeah, we get humidity bad.
Yeah, it's a thing. Not something I have to deal with. For those tuning in, welcome. Thanks for being here with us. We are going to be recording today, Season 3, Episode 5 of the Concealed Carry Podcast. We're going to kind of kick off the recording here in a few minutes. We're going to be talking about gun belts. I got a few.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you got a few belts there?
Yeah, I only wear one at a time, but I do have quite a few.
Yeah, I have more holsters than I have belts.
Yes, of course, yeah.
But I have a lot of belts. Yeah. And I like my belt. I like my belts, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one of those things that definitely I've changed my mind on. And I've had a lot of changing, evolving opinions about gun belts over the last 5 to 6 years. Certainly as long as we've been doing this podcast, my opinions about what I look for in a gun belt have changed. Yeah. I know, Matthew, you've published reviews on our site of a handful of different belts.
Mm-hmm.
So you've looked at them very objectively. And so it should be a good time. Welcome, Tim. Thanks for tuning in. Okay. If you're live with us, folks, go ahead and type in where you're tuning in from. We're glad to have you here. Both those of you who are tuning in via Facebook Live as well as YouTube Live, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. YouTube.
Or YouTube is. I don't know.
I don't know. Do you call it YouTube Live?
I'm just surprised they still allow us to be on there.
Yeah. It'll be interesting who gives us the boot first, YouTube or Facebook. Welcome, Dave from Denver. Thanks for being here. Mike from Wisconsin. He's dealing with the heat as well. Casey from Louisiana. Speaking of heat, man, I should stop complaining.
Man,
you poor Wisconsin, Ohio, and Louisiana people, what you deal with is a whole different level of what I have to deal with.
Well, Casey weren't you just in Florida, Casey? I think I remember last week.
Florida, Louisiana, they're both gross and hot this time of year. I'm not saying generally. I'm saying that the heat plus humidity is a bad combination.
Right.
That's all I'm implying. Nothing more.
Daniel, I'm with you, Daniel.
Yeah. Daniel from Ohio. Yep. Mike is here from Michigan. Timothy from Florida. Excellent. We're going to go ahead and get started, guys. We're going to kick this off, and we're really excited. We're going to be talking about gun belts. For those of you who are here live with us, feel free to chime in and throw in your comments, and where possible and relevant, we will try and address questions and comments as they come in. Okay. Johnny and Chula Vista. That's a hot heat. Matthew knows what Chula Vista feels like.
I live, man. That's where I live, man.
Yeah, I've been there. Been on the beat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Let's do this. In 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 3, Episode 5. Welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the ConcealedCarry.com network, sponsored by Access Sites. Today is July 28th, 2021, and I'm your host today, Jacob Paulson. I am joined by my friend, Matthew Marister.
Greetings, sir. How are you?
Just fine, thank you. Unlike Riley, I don't do weird titles. I just say Matthew's my friend, and we move on.
Yeah, I like friend. I think that's good.
Friend works, right? So notably, Riley is absent today. He's traveling, as it were, and so he's not here to participate with us today. We will not be recording 2 episodes today. I guess that this doesn't need to be an audio recording, so Riley maybe edit this out later. But today we're only recording 1 episode, and the other one will be recorded later this week for publishing. Today we're going to be talking about criteria for gun belts. And the title of the episode specifically says Jacob's criteria for gun belts, but because I'm concerned that I might miss something or that I'm foolish and stupid, I got Matthew here to keep me in check and add to that discussion.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'll try to keep you in check. I don't know.
So we should have a good time. But first, our sponsors. Hey, if you don't like our sponsor episodes or our sponsor mentions within the podcast, I think all I can say is too bad. We have to have them because this is how we pay the bills. So please, make sure you pay attention and don't try and skip through our sponsor mentions and take care of our sponsors. Tell them we sent you. So first, today's sponsor is CCW Safe. In our opinion, the best option for those seeking some sort of self-defense related insurance or coverage. Self-defense, CCW Safe will be there to take care of you should you be involved in some sort of incident. They will come to your aid physically and financially. And we have studied out that industry many times over, and we're very comfortable with and feel strongly about endorsing that product. Also, today's episode is brought to you by XS Sites. XS Sites is the title sponsor of our podcast network, but also today they're sponsor of this particular episode. And there's a lot of good sites out there. Don't pretend to believe that only one company makes good sites, but we really like XS Sites. And not only do they put out a high quality product, they have lots of different options, but they're made in the US and they're very affordable. So go check them out at xssites.com. There you have it.
Yeah.
Matthew, you ready to talk about belts?
I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
All right. So I think before we get into the criteria, let's talk about journey. Like Matthew, do you remember? I mean, you come from a different background than me. You were in the military. You were a Marine. Presumably, you wore a belt as a Marine, and then you were a patrol officer in Southern California. You wore some sort of duty belt there. Talk a little bit about kind of your discovery process and what it's looked like over the last however many years for you in terms of off-duty or concealed carry and belts. Like, what have you gone through there?
Yeah, it's crazy because just as you were talking about that earlier before the show started recording, about changing kind of like some of your opinions over the years, I think like a lot of I hate to say technology when we're talking about belts, but a lot of like purposeful design, I guess maybe would be better, has gone into stuff like holsters and belts. And so things that, I was looking at 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, I've changed my mind on a lot of stuff because now new things are available. So yeah. So before it was like you get a gun belt was like a leather belt, right? Like it was a thick leather belt, and some of them were reinforced with some sort of, some of them had like a steel core or something like that, for off-duty, carry or concealed carry. And like duty belts, you had a big, maybe like a Velcro lining belt, and then you had your big, thick war belt or duty belt. And so my thought process was, when I went to stop being a cop and I was just concealed carrying, I got like a nice, good thick leather belt that was reinforced, and that was an awesome gun belt. And over the time, I've seen newer belts come out with, going from the nylon belt that everybody would think of as like really, real supple and just kind of like a nylon riggers belt type thing, to a reinforced like nylon webbing belt that was extremely stiff, and now kind of like dialing it back and kind of combining the both worlds, or combining both a stiff belt and more supple in the areas where it needs to be. So yeah, so it's kind of been an evolutionary type thing.
Yeah, so our journeys are probably similar, except that I carried a gun for a very long time with a very crappy belt. I'll just admit failure on this one and confess that for, I don't know, many moons, more than 5 years, I carried a concealed firearm with what I would consider a non-gun belt, a very traditional, Walmart quality leather belt. Just because I didn't know better. Like no one ever told me, hey, you should probably get a good gun belt. Like I didn't know a gun belt was a thing. So I just wore the same belt I wore every day. And then one day I started carrying a gun. And so I just didn't change the belt. I just kept using that same belt. And I think that's pretty common. I think I know we certainly see that a lot on the gun range. We see our students and people come into our classes, and they're just wearing the same belt they've always been using, prior to being a gun person. So we're going to talk about some of the kind of failure points of belts and why that is an issue. But like you, Matthew, my first gun belt was just a thicker leather belt, and then you start to figure out the different nylon things, and there's even some kind of what I would call universal naming now. Like, for example, Cobra belts. Cobra belt is not a brand, it's a style of buckle. And we see like tons of companies out there that have a Cobra belt.
Mhm.
And you mentioned a Rigger's belt, and I'll add Scuffle belt. And we see kind of some of these names that are used by companies to identify the style of belt, and so it's kind of started to become some universally recognized terms, I guess. And maybe that's me, maybe I'm naive, but I definitely see that kind of pattern across several different companies. So we're going to kind of go through these. So yeah, I think we have to start with the first failure point of belt, or the first criteria for a belt, because it's the one that if you're listening to this and you still have never purchased a gun belt, a concealed carry EDC belt, then this is the first failure point you need to know about.
Mhm.
And that would be simply that you need a stiff belt. Like, it's got to be stiff enough.
Mhm.
It can't be weak sauce. So Matthew, when we say stiff enough, what do we mean?
Well, the thing is, a lot of people, and I'm reading the comments, say like, yeah, I'm just using the same, Walmart belt that I got, and it, it holds up my pants. And now you're putting, maybe a pound or so of gear on that belt and expecting it to hold your pants up and your belt. And what ends up happening is, that belt can't sustain, it can't keep everything together. So in order for you to keep your gear from, kind of leaning out, especially if you're carrying like an outside the waistband or something like that, you tighten it up tighter. And so it becomes uncomfortable, because that's the only way to get some sort of like hold on the belt, right? If it's a normal, I guess, tension around your waist, then everything kind of sags out. So a stiffer belt will resist that kind of curling out of the belt. If you're just listening, kind of like maybe if you're thinking of the gun, kind of the butt of the gun kind of just pulling away and kind of flailing out away from your body, I guess.
Yeah.
Would be how I'd describe it.
It's also about distributing weight.
Mm-hmm.
A stiffer belt, it takes what is currently a pain point, this 2+ pounds of metal and crap sitting on your waistline somewhere, that's dragging you down and causing your body to deal with that weight in that spot. A stiffer belt will distribute that weight effectively. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know not literally, but it distributes the way your body works around that weight, the way your body supports that weight. That's the word I'm looking for. So that you're no longer, getting dragged down in one spot. That stiff belt allows your whole body to help support that one heavy point. And so that's another really kind of key element of the stiff belt. I'll give you another interesting one. I know several episodes ago, there were some discussions about holsters. And I think that the way a holster attaches to a belt is also very different based on stiffness. If you can, here's just a like simple test. If you can take your belt, not on your pants, that'd be weird. Take it off your pants and hold it in your hand, just between two fingers, your thumb and your pointer finger. And if you can just squeeze it and bend it in half to the point that you can, make it touch, your belt's not stiff enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your belt sucks. And it might have been adequate to hold up your pants, but it's not adequate to hold up your gun in a way that's safe and reliable and healthy for your back and hips and joints.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good test.
Yeah. Another thing is, well, we'll come back to it. I was going to talk about width, but we're going to come back. So it's got to be stiff enough. It's got to be stiff enough. And I think there's a lot of ways we see that achieved. So let's talk a little bit about how belts become stiff enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing we see a lot of is just it's thicker.
Right.
So you and I are both talking about kind of leather belts. And this is generally what we see most leather belt companies do, is it's like, oh, don't worry, it's just got 3 layers of leather now, or 2 layers of leather, or 5 billion layers of leather, or whatever it is. Like, there's just a bunch of, we just made it thicker.
Right.
And so poof, now it's awesome sauce. That sometimes is a very viable option. I don't have anything against that. We sell belts on concealedcarry.com that is exactly, they're just thicker belts. And I think it's fine. Like, I don't have any issue with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way it can be achieved. We also see belts, like you mentioned earlier, like the steel core. We'll see these belt companies that they put something in the lining of the material, whether it's nylon or leather or whatever other material. They put something like in the middle that's stiffer. Some like we see some different plastic style, things, materials that are effectively composites. We see steel, or there's some metal related things. So anyway, we'll see like some sort of core inside the material that helps add rigidity to the belt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that helps. Sometimes I think it actually becomes a problem, which might lead us to our second little thought here. But Matthew, anything else about the belt just not being stiff enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be stiff, right? But as you start adding layers and stuff, especially with leather belts, I'm not saying that anybody couldn't carry a double layered leather belt, that they would be too weak to carry that, but it does add weight, and you're adding a gun, and sometimes the weight of the belt just is uncomfortable, right? So so we got to get it stiff enough, but at a certain point, just the makeup of the belt becomes an issue, right? If we're trying to do that. So,
I mean, I'll give you another weird one about stiff beltness is that retention of holster. Like we'll see sometimes a poor clip on a holster is aggravated because the belt sucks, because the belt's not stiff enough. And if the belt can twist and roll, then it can't retain the holster properly.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. My number 2 here. The belt can't be too stiff. And this one, I think we don't think about enough. I think there's almost become this thinking in the industry that the stiffer, the better. And that's just not true.
Mm-hmm. To a certain degree, right?
Like, it's like, what? Like I've seen advertising, and I won't mention company names, though some of you, it'll be quite obvious, but I've seen belt companies who run ads, them advertising that you can stand on their belt. Like put this on the ground and stand on it, and it fold or bend or collapse. It's like, bro, that's too stiff. Like if I can stand on the belt and it doesn't like move at all, I think that's a problem. Yeah. So why would a belt being too stiff be an issue, Matthew?
Well, I mean, and here's the thing, like I've worn belts that I find are a bit too stiff. And what ends up happening is, like, if you wear baggy clothing, right, a baggy shirt or something, it's not probably as evident. But if you wear any sort of like t-shirt that's even somewhat normal fit, I guess, what you'll have is like the shirt will go down around your body normally, and then right around your waistline, it kind of like bubbles out, because the belt is actually like printing. It's actually like expanding the girth around your waist, not by thickness of the belt, but just because it has no bendability. It's not moving with the rest of your body naturally, I guess.
Yeah, it's like wearing a hula hoop. It's like
yeah, exactly.
It's non-conforming, and I'm going to talk more about conforming here in a bit, or maybe we just kind of combine it with this idea of too thick. But a belt that's too thick, yeah, it definitely doesn't conform. Like here's a test for you. I'll put on a belt and I'll bend over, or I'll like crouch, like a umpire, baseball umpire, like crouch down like that, or a catcher. And if the back of my pants is bowing out, right, like inviting somebody to chuck something down my crack, then that's a problem. Like that belt's too stiff. It's not conforming to my body. It's conforming to its manufactured shape. It's a problem. If you guys, and kind of as a visual, if you guys have leather belts at home, and when you first get the leather belt, it's straight, right? And then after you've worn it for several years, you'll notice it has like a curve to it. And that's because, our bodies aren't, like when we wear the belt, it has to like wrap around our bodies, and it does kind of has to conform. And so, that back part that kind of bends down ends up conforming to your body. But if it's so stiff, it never does that. So you always have this, like that hula hoop effect, like you were saying, where it just sticks out in the back. Yeah. It's gotta, I mean, we aren't circle shaped. Like humans are not circle shaped. Like our hips have some circle to them, right? But in the front, we all have different shapes, and in the back, we tend to almost concave to a certain degree. You almost have a reverse concave type shape in the back. And this is a weird one, because certainly we see some belts that are too stiff. We see some belts that are probably the appropriate amount of stiffness, but I'll just throw out maybe our first brand mention here. And I see that the designer of the belt's actually watching right now. But the foundation belt is interesting because the foundation belt's the only belt I've ever seen that's designed very specifically to conform in the smaller back, to kind of allow that shape to not hula hoop. Now, what they do, what the maker of that belt does, is they have the belt a certain stiffness, which I would call pretty standard for a nylon gun belt, all the way around, except for in the smaller back. There's about I don't know, depending on the size of the belt, probably something like 4 to 6 inches or so that should be at the center of your back that goes back down to single thickness. So, imagine kind of like a double thickness nylon belt all the way around, except in the small of the back where it's single thickness. And it's designed for that reason. So that, when you're bending over, moving, adjusting, sitting, whatever, that part of your body that's not like, it's not circular in shape. It needs flex and it needs to be able to conform properly that way. So it's pretty clever. And I think that's an example of a clever design that addresses this issue we're talking about, where I need it to be stiff for all the reasons mentioned, but if it's too stiff, it doesn't conform to the body. It's also a comfort issue. A too stiff belt sucks to wear. Like, you just doesn't feel right. It feels like somebody put something like metal around your hip. Like, it just, every time you sit down, it feels like it's pinching into you. Every time you bend over, you're like, ugh, it's like a hot point from a holster, except for it's your belt that's digging into your body.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of like where I was talking about, like the evolution of like something simple, like a belt, before it was just, okay, I'm not going to go with a really soft, supple belt. So I'm going to go with a gun belt that's thick and reinforced, and I'll just get used to, like, that's how I deal with it. Right. Like, wearing a gun belt is going to be kind of uncomfortable at times, just because it's got to be tight. And now it doesn't necessarily have to, because there's some, like, I hate saying like technology, but like there's some purposeful thought into designing a belt that's supple where it needs to be and supportive where it needs to be. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yes, let's talk a little bit about width. So I think another interesting failure point is when it comes to belts is just the width of the belt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in an ideal world, you would buy and wear a belt that is a width that corresponds to the width of the clip from your holster. So, for example, the standard crappy Walmart belt, that I wore for decades and decades was, I think, it had to have been 1 inch wide. Like, it was a 1 inch belt, which means it fits like all pants ever, right? All belt loops are going to, work for a 1 inch belt, and it holds up your pants all the same. Wouldn't matter if I was using a rope, right? Anything's going to hold up the pants. But if you're using a 1 inch belt, and I see this quite a bit, and you're wearing a holster with 1 3/4 inch or 2 inch clips, that's going to be a problem. Your holster's going to be bouncing around, sliding back and forth.
Yeah. I may be dating myself, but I remember like those in the like 90s, those Z Cavarici, like tiny little leather belts and stuff like that. Like, or the braided leather belt that's like, you wear with like loafers and the carton, anyways. Those don't work. They don't work for guns, right? Like the clip isn't designed for those. Right. So, it has to be the right thickness, but then at the same time, and I don't want to jump ahead, and maybe if I am, you'll rein me back in, but the belt buckle also has to be able to be fed through normal size pant loops. That's that's like an issue, because I'm not a big dude. And so my belt loops are, I think, like appropriately sized for like a 34 size waist. And sometimes the belt buckle of the belt doesn't go through. So, if you start it on one side and it's like, oh, I'm carrying appendix, so I want to shift the belt, the buckle over to the side, I have to undo the whole belt and feed that non-buckle side through. But so looking at the buckle size as well as the belt size is also important, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to the buckle in a moment, because I think it's along these same lines. But I've had belts that had nothing to do with the buckle. The belt itself was too thick to feed through my pants, and generally this happens with dress pants. Like most days I'm wearing jeans or some sort of range pant or cargo pant or something. But on Sunday I wear dress clothes to church. I wear a nice suit, and so suits are not equipped with the same belt loop size things as a pair of jeans. That's just by the nature of the beast. And so it might be necessary for you to have more than one belt for different situations. Also, I'll add that you look a little bit goofy wearing some nylon belt with a suit. Not that it can't be done. It just looks a little goofy, right? So I do think there's also something to be said about, well, maybe this belt works really well for this outfit that I wear, but not for that one. So it might mean owning multiple, and they can be expensive. So I think you need to be thoughtful in those decisions and check return policies and things. But yeah, I guess just to leave some thoughts here for someone's like, well, then what size do I go get? You can always measure your belt loops of your pants. You can just take a ruler to it and figure it out. But in my experience, most jeans and those, kind of more traditional pants generally will accommodate a 1.5 inch belt without any issues. 1.5 is pretty standard. I think it's also standard on the holster side. I think you find most holsters and clips out of the gate, they're generally standardized around 1.5 inch belts. So that's just a kind of a starting point you might consider. Again, you might have pants where a 1.5 inch belt doesn't really work, or you might have a holster that came with different clips. You can always change out the clips too. Maybe you love your holster, but the clips are too big for the belt you love so much. Maybe you need to go get some Ulti clips. We sell those on concealedcarry.com, and they'll work with any size belt. It doesn't matter. So anyway, just giving you kind of a starting point. 1.5, in my experience, has been pretty standard, Matthew.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. Buckle. Let's talk more about the buckle. So you mentioned too big or too thick of a buckle means I can't feed it. And someone might be like, in their mind's eye, trying to picture this. So I just want to clarify your comment, because I think it's super relevant. Like Matthew, the buckle goes in the front. I don't have to feed it through the loops. Yeah, you do. At least one of them. Like however the belt connects, one side of it has to go through all the loops. And so if you're not a gun belt person, if you've never bought a gun belt, you're like, I don't get the problem, because that's on a traditional belt. That's not a problem, because one side has a buckle, the other does not. The other side has holes, right? And so you feed the non-buckle end through your belt loops, and it's a non-issue. But what we see with a lot of gun belts is both ends of the belt have part of the buckle, and the buckle like clips it to itself or snaps or something. And so now you do have to feed one half of your buckle through your belt loops, and that's what you're referring to, I assume, Matthew.
Sure. Yeah. And you mentioned the Cobra buckle, right? Like that kind of concept where there's two ends. They both have some sort of fastening mechanism on either side, and it becomes an issue, especially like I said, if with most I don't want to say tactical pants, but cargo pants and jeans, like you said. But sometimes you get shorts or something that aren't, made for carrying, they're more dressy clothes, and they have that narrow belt loop, and it becomes you have to kind of wiggle it through each one. So you're almost feeding the belt through with the pants off I find it much easier. I almost have to do that with some of my pants.
Yeah. It's brutal. It's like, it's easier to, like you said, remove the buckle from the belt entirely, so I can feed it through my pants, and then feed the buckle through the little slots to get it back onto the belt, and then attack. But then at the end of the day, you're doing the same thing. You're like, oh, okay, here we go again. It's not fun. I think it's a very effective tool for certain situations. If you were in the military or something, and this is a situation where this is going on to a battle belt or duty belt that's then being attached to some under belt, then it's a non-issue, right? It doesn't matter. Yes. And so it makes sense. Like that kind of buckle was designed for situations where it's an appropriate buckle, but using like a Cobra buckle or other things that are similar with traditional pants is a no-go. It's a torturous situation.
Right. Yep.
Whatever that's worth. And let's talk more about buckles other than feeding it through the pants. The other issue is that I'll see people who their buckle is printed. It's like, congratulations, you got a great gun belt. It's concealing your gun oh so well, but your belt is printing. So it's like, it's like, look at me, like you can't see my gun. And I'm like, what's that? Oh, that's my belt. Oh, okay, because it looks like a gun. Like it's like for a guy like me, right, who's looking at someone to see if they have a gun on. And
Right.
so there's this idea that we want the buckle to be as low profile as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, so, okay. So I don't know. I live in Ohio, but I've been to Texas in the South and I've seen people with big belt buckles, and that's cool, man. Like that's totally cool. But when you're trying to conceal a firearm in the appendix position, and you have a huge, like, hubcap for a belt buckle, it draws attention, and it also sometimes obstructs where your clips can go. So you end up moving that buckle to the left, and now or to the right or whatever to get it out of the way, so you can fasten your holster there. And now, so you have this like lump on the left side or the right side of your hip, and then you have and it's not ideal. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's just not functional. It's just not going to work well for you. You're right. It is exasperated when you carry appendix, because you're already trying to conceal. You just added 2 to 2.5 inches worth of displacement into your waistband. Well, 1.5 to 2 inches of displacement into your waistband, and you already have to conceal that. Like that's already a challenge, right? Like that we all deal with. But then you add some bulky buckle on top of that displacement, and it's like, my gosh, like the buckle might not have been horrible before, but with the gun behind it now, yeah, it's like everything's making everything worse. And so to your point, that's like, oh, but slide the buckle over here. But it's this massive buckle. It's awkward. Like now anyway, yeah, it's low profile. Gotta have a low profile buckle. I think that's super duper critical.
Agreed.
Yep. I'm going to address a couple of comments here really quickly, because we got a lot of conversation going on today with our live viewers. And so I think it's really important. People talked about how, just a comment here when we were talking about stiff belts, they said it especially sucks on a long road trip. Again, talking about that issue of comfort and that being very difficult to deal with. There's a great comment in here about someone who says, yeah, that's an issue that they have with the way they're trying to feed this belt through their pants, and then through an open buckle, and the stiffness makes it stick out. Mark wants me to go do a demonstration. It sounds like a horrible like infomercial. Has this ever happened to you? but these are all real challenges that we have to deal with when we're trying to buckle on a gun. Figure that stuff out. So, all right, good times. Here's another one, and I think this one is not spoken about enough, or at least we don't address it the same way, all of us. And that's adjustability. So, Matthew, what do we mean, and what's the value in adjustability?
So, okay, so when think about your leather belt, and I don't know if it's just me, but like I always get when I had a leather belt, and I can't remember the last time I actually like used a leather belt. But like, so I never was able to get it quite the right tightness with the holes that were there. So I'd end up like taking a little leather punch and punching a hole, or making it, one tighter, one in the middle of the other two holes. And then I'm telling you, like, and maybe it's just me, but like sometimes the belt would feel good and I would have my firearm there. If I didn't have my firearm, inside my pants, then I needed to tighten up the belt and then needed a different hole. Or if I wore certain clothes, maybe that I was, tucking in my shirt and using a holster everything changed. And so I never was really able to get the belt consistently tight where I in different types of clothing, or different types of, maybe I was carrying one type of gun or a gun with the sidecar holster for a extra magazine. Everything changed each time that I wore my belt. So I hated it, and I wanted to be able to get something that was like kind of like Velcro, where you could adjust the tension. If you had a big dinner, you could adjust let it out a little bit. If you didn't, you didn't eat for a couple of days or whatever, you tighten it up. So it's kind of the adjustability spiel that I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the person has got to figure that out, what's right for them, right? But certainly adjustability is preferable.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned earlier that I wear a leather gun belt on Sundays because I wear a suit, and so that's a situation where leather belts are relatively limiting. Generally, you have a hole every 1 inch. That's pretty standard, and it just is. Like I deal with that. I put up with that in that situation because that's the belt I want to use with what I'm wearing. So it's fine. It just is what it is, and it's okay. But I don't think it's ideal, right? It would certainly be ideal if I had infinite adjustability along that belt. And that's what some of these other belts get. I think we got to talk about Velcro, and I think we also have to talk about like ratcheting click kind of belts.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to start with Velcro, and then I'll send it over to you, Matthew. So Velcro is what it sounds like. Velcro belts, generally how it works is the belt is feeding through some sort of buckle and it's coming back, and you're kind of applying pressure to tighten it down, and then you're securing it in place with Velcro. The Velcro prevents you from having some sort of flap, flapping around, and it's also an additional layer of security that keeps it from coming loose or coming out. And the good about Velcro, these kind of Velcro belts, is that you do have that infinite adjustability. You can tighten it or loosen it to exactly whatever degree you want. Arguably, I think a downside that someone could speak to is that it makes sound, right? You're constantly, every time you want to adjust it, there's a sound associated with that. That doesn't the belt I choose to wear is Velcro. That doesn't bother me. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't make constant adjustments in public, but I think that's a valid, thing that someone might speak to. I think another thing that some people don't like about Velcro is that it gets dirty. If it gets a bunch of junk in it, then it's, it loses its effectiveness.
Lint
so, I don't have that issue. I've never had to clean out my belt because it's so full of whatever it is it would be full of. But those are valid. Those are valid comments. I don't want to, fail to mention them because they're valid. People bring those up, and neither of them impact me in my decision, in my experience, but they certainly could.
Yeah.
So Matthew, what about these ratcheting belts? You have a few, I know.
Yeah, there's a couple different companies, and I mean, many of them are. They're exactly the same kind of concept, but if you think of like a track on the inside of the belt, right, and there's a ratcheting mechanism in the buckle, and as you slide the buckle, the belt through the buckle, each of a tooth catches, spring-loaded tooth catches on this track, and it kind of locks it into place, and so you can maybe down to a 1/4 of an inch adjustment either way, not infinitely, but a lot of adjustment in 1/4 of an inch increments. So it's very adjustable, and they're nice because there is you don't have to wrap, if you don't like Velcro, you don't have to wrap something through and then go back and fasten it on the other side. You just it's kind of like a traditional looking belt where it feeds through, and then you have the running end on the opposite side, right, of the buckle. So,
yeah. I like the adjustability factor on those. They also, by the way, do make a little bit of noise for those who complain about Velcro being noisy. They generally don't make any noise to loosen. Right? You kind of hit some sort of loosening catch that removes the saw teeth, whatever, and so then it can slide freely. But when you tighten it, it definitely makes a noise. Click, click, click. So I don't think it's a big deal. But for those who are concerned about noise, there is a noise there associated with tightening it. I think it's important. We talked about, you gave some reasons why adjustability matters. But for me, adjustability also is an issue of just straight up concealment. Like I know how I carry my gun and my body shape, that if I tighten my belt down tighter, like if I just grab it and yank on it a little bit harder, my gun disappears more. Like it just conceals better. And when I loosen my belt, the opposite, right? Like it starts to print more. And so there's also, I think, a concealability factor with this. And so maybe, a person might say, well, I'm sitting in my house all day, I'm going to wear my belt a little bit looser. and that's going to print a little bit, but it's not a big deal because I'm home, and maybe when I leave, I tighten it down a little bit and suck it in a little bit more, and poof, my gun disappears. So anyway, I just think that there's a lot of reasons why that kind of thing matters. I'm not hesitant to throw out some brands, Matthew. I know Next Belt has done very well in our industry. They've done a good job marketing their product to gun enthusiasts. You have a Core belt, I think, as I recall. Kore.
Yeah. Yeah, they're good. I like it a lot. One of the things, and we kind of didn't mention, we kind of talked around it with the, matching your clothing style. What I like about like some of the belts, like Core Belt, and I think Next Belt is doing that as well. They have different buckles and different colors and stuff. And I think Core Belt, actually, they also have leather. But and so you can take like a nylon belt and kind of dress it up and make it look a little bit more dressy, where it doesn't look like you're about to hit the range in a tuxedo or like dress pants or something. So that's one benefit of some of these ratcheting belts, because they do, they operate off of a buckle. So,
yeah. Another one I was thinking of, there's Blackbeard.
Yes.
I can't remember what the name of the product is, because not all their belts are that style, but they have one that is.
Yeah, I have one of those. And theirs is a little bit different. They have like a ratcheting device, almost like the tie downs on like the truck bed tie downs, where this, it's like a lever that you're pulling and it's ratcheting it down. So those are a little bit different than the Next Belt and the Core, but same concept.
Yep. Valid. Very good. So I think that we've covered a lot of things. I'm just going to kind of recap here and see if there's anything we're missing. So we talked about, it's got to be stiff enough, but it can't be too stiff. We talked about being too high profile, the buckle itself having a hard time concealing, and instructor buckles tend to be problematic. We also have Cobra buckles that I think are challenging. We talked about conformity to the body. We talked about adjustability. I think all those things matter. We talked about just getting the right width of belt, trying to match it. We talked about maybe having to have different belts for different outfits and clothing and things like that. I think it's all very valid. I'll throw out one more idea, and then I think we can have closing comments. I really like what is generally referred to as a money belt. So I'm a big fan of belts that allow me to conceal additional items, generally cash, frankly. Like if any of you ever kill me in the street, you should definitely steal my belt. There's probably cash in it. But anyway, I just have always, for a long time, for a very long time, I've been wearing belts that I can conceal something in them. Cash is a common thing. A razor blade, a handcuff key. I had a handcuff key in my belt for decades. So I just am a big fan of belts that allow me to carry a couple more things. Do you have much experience with those, Matthew?
I don't. I mean, I know the duty belts, like my police duty belt. There was a little Velcro. It was a Velcro lined liner belt and inner belt, and then this kind of had Velcro, and then your keepers. But on the inside, you could put a little Velcro tab that you could put a razor blade. You could put handcuff keys just for your that exact reason. You didn't say the reason, but obviously if you end up getting bound up or something like that, you might be able to overcome that.
Yeah, exactly. This is a struggle for me because a lot of my favorite gun belt companies do not offer their product in a money belt style. And I'm like, ooh, I really like this belt, but I want a money belt. So what you can do, you can buy some products that almost like, think like a stretchy, like mag carrier kind of style thing that you kind of feed the belt onto, and it allows you to put some additional items in there. I've seen that before. Stealth Gear makes a product like that. We sell it on our site. And so it's not as good for small items, like we're talking handcuff key or cash, but maybe larger items, like allows you to stow, maybe a tourniquet or a spare mag, or something that's not going to slip out of that space. pretty well. One I will just add, in case just by some miracle, dude, somebody is listening to this and they're like a belt designer or manufacturer. Let me add that yes, I want a money belt, but I don't. But you got to be careful with the zipper or the closure components, because traditionally most money belts are zipped up. They have like a zipper in the middle, and that's how you kind of expose the middle where you put your stuff. Well, the zipper's a problem. The zipper adds more bulk to that belt than the crap I'm stuffing in it. And the zipper also is going to have some sort of pull. The zipper pulls, and zipper pulls also become a discomfort point, like a pain point, wherever you put the zipper pulls. And so I've seen a couple money belts that I think are very clever, that instead of using a zipper, they just basically have material fold over itself, like an envelope. And that tends to work still functionally well, but it removes the bulk that comes from the zipper, and the zipper pulls. So for anyone who wants to go custom make Jacob a belt one day, like, now you got my list.
What about those old like rubber coin purse things that you pinch in the side and they open up?
Oh yeah,
something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that. There you go. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I want to be able to hide crap in my belt. I like it. I want to do that. There are certainly belt companies out there that do that. For a long time, I was wearing belts from Wilderness Tactical. That's a brand we probably should mention. I think Wilderness Tactical makes phenomenal belts. We sell some of not their whole product line, but we sell some of their belts on concealedcarry.com as well. And they give you the option to add the money belt, compartment, I guess, to any belt they sell. So that was really nice. That was a nice feature. I don't know a lot of other companies that have that feature. And so it's something you got to, maybe you'd have to custom request or ask for, but I'm hoping to see more of that in the future. I'll add one last one, and I think they're out of business now, but for a while, there was a company called making a belt called the 369 belt. And it was specifically designed for that. Like, you could stuff all sorts of stuff in there. It was crazy. They wanted you to be able to put your phone charger in there. I mean, all sorts of crap. Yeah. And so anyway, I'm into that, but I think we'll kind of wrap this up by just mentioning some brands, or kind of doing a recap there. If people are like, this is great, Jacob, but where do I go buy all these awesome belts you guys are talking about? The answer to that is, of course, concealedcarry.com. That's where you go buy your belts. We don't stock and sell every belt that's out there for sale. So there's a lot of brands that have great products. And so that's a good starting point, but we're going to mention some products right now that are not available for sale on our website that you might need to buy elsewhere. But I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. We mentioned the Foundation belt. The Foundation belt is made by EDC Belt Company. Their website's edcbeltco.com, or you can buy the Foundation belt on concealedcarry.com as well. It's currently my favorite EDC belt, Matthew. It's the one we were talking about. It goes from semi-thick to less thick, specifically at the small of the back. It's the most conforming belt I've ever seen. It has extremely low profile buckle. It's stiff, but not too stiff. It just seems to be a good balance. It's 1.5 inch, and I think the Foundation belt's pretty solid.
Agree, totally. It's a fantastic belt.
Yeah. We mentioned leather belts. There's so many companies. Anyone who makes leather holsters probably makes leather belts. That's a good rule of thumb. Like, any leather holster company probably's got leather belts for sale. On our website, you can buy several different leather belts made by Crossbreed. 1791 Gun Leather, I think, also makes some leather belts, and there's other companies out there too that you can find. We mentioned kind of the more Scuffle and Cobra belt style things. Viking Tactics is a good source of that. 511 Tactical has a lot of those. Stealth Gear USA, we sell some of their belts, and they have some of those available as well. Other brands that you would mention, Matthew, that have that kind of style of belt?
There is a Liberty Belt Company, and I know Blue Alpha Gear makes some Cobra. I believe they make a Cobra belt. I know they make a low profile belt.
Yeah. Yep. That's a brand that's very reputable. I do not own a Blue Alpha Gear belt, but I've seen many people rave about them. We mentioned Nex Belt, NEXBELT. We mentioned Core Essentials and Blackbeard. When we were talking about kind of the ratcheting and click style belts, I think there's plenty of those out there. And I think that there's just tons of companies you can buy a good belt from, and a lot of those are unearned. There's a comment here from someone who mentions Bigfoot. So I think Bigfoot Belts does a good job. That company is owned by the same people who own Alien Gear holsters. I do think that some of the Bigfoot belts are too stiff. I put them in the category of like uncomfortably stiff, but they have a whole product line, and so some of those are probably better than others. And each person's got to decide what they like, what they prefer, and what they think is comfortable. So I think a lot of these companies we've mentioned, they have belts I like and belts that I don't like.
Mhm.
Any other brands that we should throw out, Matthew, or anything else you want to say about belts?
I'll probably think of like 10 of them once we end the podcast, but I think we got a good list.
Okay. So guys, if you are currently walking around and you don't have a gun belt, you're using just a traditional, prior to owning a gun belt, please, repent of your horrible, sinful ways and go invest in a good quality belt. And I think that you'll be happier. It's probably worth experimenting with different belts. Check the return policy before you buy one, so you can have a degree of confidence that if you don't like it, if you don't find it's comfortable, if it doesn't work with your pants or your belt loops or your holster, that you can return it and get your money back. I would just add the shameless plug that please consider shopping for your gun belt at concealedcarry.com. We have a pretty decent selection of gun belts, and we have a 60-day no question asked return policy. So with that in mind, thank you again to our sponsors, and a request here to our loyal listeners. If you are new to the podcast, certainly consider subscribing. You can do that anywhere where you listen to podcasts: Audible, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or whatever your favorite podcast listening tool is. We're there. Go get subscribed so you never miss an episode again. Please consider going back and listening to past episodes of the Concealed Carry podcast. That could be overwhelming. There's over like 500 of them, 520, 30-ish right now. But I think there's a huge amount of really valuable information. So if you've never gone back and listened to episodes before you subscribe, please consider that. And last but not least, please consider writing us a review on iTunes or Google Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever it is you listen to our podcast. Please consider writing a review. The reviews are arguably one of the largest impact factors that determines if people are going to be able to find our podcast. When someone goes to these podcast marketplaces and they do a search, I want to find a gun related podcast. There's a lot of podcasts that mention guns. So how well we rank in that search, how likely people are to see us and consider trying out our podcast is in large part impacted by your reviews and your ratings of our podcast. So please, if you haven't already, or if it's been a long time since you've done that, most of those platforms allow you to review our podcast as many times as you want. So please consider going and adding a rating and reviewing our podcast. We're very grateful for those that do. And even if you don't have 100% good things to say about us, it's okay. We got thick skin, and we'll take the criticism along with the good. Any last comments, Matthew?
Well, we do have to give away a prize.
Should I not forget? That's Matthew. Make sure I don't do dumb things. So for those who don't know, every single week, the Concealed Carry Podcast Network gives away a prize. To enter to win every single week, you need to go to podcasts.concealedcarry.com and just click on giveaway and fill out that form. It's a revolving door. So you can, when you get there, you'll see the giveaway that's currently running. It'll show you that, what products being given away, et cetera. It'll show you how many entries you have into that giveaway, and you can earn additional entries by sharing it, on social media and with your friends. And when they enter, that gives you additional entries into the random drawing. So Matthew, what are we giving away this week?
This week we're giving up a Ready Up Gear MCF Spark flashlight.
That's a dope light. Got it right here. So this is a cool flashlight, guys. I actually did some crazy testing with this last week. We went out behind our warehouse in the parking lot, and I chucked this thing as high in the air as I could. And I know that some of you are like, yeah, but how high can you really throw a flashlight? Like I played Little League baseball, when I was 8 years old. So I could chuck a flashlight. Anyway, I think we can get this thing 30, 40 feet in the air, and it comes down hitting concrete. And we did that 4 or 5 times in a row. And we turned on the light before we'd chuck it, throw it up in the air, and when it came down and bounced and rolled, still on. So this is an extremely durable flashlight. We were doing some testing the other day. It fits in a lot of your light mounts. So if you want to mount this on your rifle, it's very viable for that. It's got momentary on, and then it's got constant on. So if your name's not about to be called out by Matthew Marister, you should probably just go buy one, because they're good, and that gives our company money. So Matthew, who won the Ready Up Gear MCF Spark flashlight?
Congratulations, Mr. Edwin E.
Edwin E.
Yeah.
E is in Edwin.
E is in Edwin.
Yep. So Edwin E, Edwin Echo, good job. You are the winner of this week's giveaway. Matthew will be reaching out to you via email to confirm your shipping address so we can ship you your new MCF Spark flashlight. Thank you to everyone participating in our podcast today. We're really grateful. Thanks for being here. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Hopefully Riley will be back, so you get to hear from him too. if you care. If not, you should send us an email to podcast@concealedcarry.com and tell Riley you're happier when he's not around. So with that, guys, remember to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.